Hey, Matt Kahl. So
Yes,
you were in the documentary From Shock to Awe.
correct. Yes.
So why don't you tell me about that?
Um, I met Janine and Luke, the producer and director for From Shock to Awe. I met them back in 2015 or so, and I met them at a conscious cannabis ceremony here in Colorado with a local Native American administrator, and I met them, and it wasn't until later that their significance really became clear to me. They had mentioned when I first met them that they were they were scouting for their upcoming movie, which was about the use of ayahuasca, MDMA, and cannabis to heal from the scars of war. And I met them. They're very nice, and we said goodbye, and I promptly forgot about it. But about a year later, they contacted me and said, "Would you be willing to drink ayahuasca on camera in order for our upcoming movie?" And I quickly told them, "Well, I'll do just about anything to fix myself." So that began our journey.
Had you heard about ayahuasca before meeting them?
I had, yes. I've known about it probably for 20 years or so. I went to college back in the late 90s, which dates me a little bit, but I went to school for behavioral neuroscience, and I settled on that major because I wanted to know the mechanics of what cannabis and psychedelics did inside the brain. I had never really used any of those things prior to college, but I was exposed to them in college, and I dabbled a little bit. And I was very curious about how these things work. So I spent all of my free time studying the psychopharmacology of indole, alkylamine, hallucinogens, and cannabinoids. So that's when I got introduced to the term entourage effect, and it's really changed the way I look at natural plant medicines for a very long time.
The term what?
Um, Entourage effect.
So what is that?
The entourage effect, it's a term that was originally coined by Raphael Mechoulam. He is probably the greatest world-renowned scientist that has studied cannabis for a very long time, and he coined the term in order to refer to all of the other plant constituents that add to the effect of the primary chemical or active ingredient in whatever plant it may be. In cannabis's case, it's THC or tetrahydrocannabinol. And there are many other entourage elements in cannabis, though, things like CBD and THCV, and even non-cannabinoids like terpenes and anthocyanins and flavonoids. So all of these things to add up to a much greater effect than the active ingredient alone. And the same is true with all other plant medicines on the face of the planet. In ayahuasca, for example, the ayahuasca vine itself is the non-hallucinogenic portion of the brew. It has the MAOIs in it, the monoamine oxidase inhibitors, and those consist, the main one that most people point to is harmine, but there is tetrahydroharmalol, there is harmalol, there's norharmane, harmane. There's so many different elements that all contribute to the MAOI effect, and also to some of the psychological effects too. The alkaloids found in the vine are not as psychoactive as the DMT found in the chacruna or the Psychotria viridis.
So you've known about all this since college, right? All the science behind ayahuasca.
Yes, indeed. I've been studying it for a very long time, and I've studied it for most of my adult life. However, I swore off most of the plant medicines for a very long time when I joined the military. And I joined the military, and I I marched in lockstep with whatever they told me, and it led me into a very deep, dark hole of pharmaceutical maltreatment and overtreatment by the VA after a medevac from theater.
Yeah, in the film, there was a shot of your medicine cabinet, and you had all of the prescription bottles
Yeah.
just stacked up, almost overflowing, which is ridiculous. So, with your background in knowledge of psychedelics, how did you end up getting mixed up with the VA's prescriptions, and you didn't consider taking ayahuasca until the cannabis center?
Yeah, basically, so when I was young, I wasn't really, I didn't really look towards any of these substances for healing. It was more, I was curious about them, and especially when being introduced to cannabis and some of the basic psychedelics like psilocybin in college, I wasn't looking towards them to get healing, but after using them for a little period of time, I ended up getting some healing that I didn't even know
Right.
that I started looking at ways to try to fix certain things in my life, such as my relationship with my parents, and I was addressing family trauma and family issues back then in college, even though I didn't really know what I was doing.
Right.
And then after college, I joined the military, and there's a certain period of indoctrination there, and you follow orders, and so I was really trying to be the best soldier I could be, and when they told me that I couldn't be an infantryman anymore, then I was still trying to be the best soldier I could be, but in a different way, and I was just following the orders of my doctors. And it turns out that the doctors don't really know what they're doing when they're trying to treat mental illness in this country, and we need more and better tools. So eventually, after getting to the end of my rope with pharmaceutical medicines, I started looking back into the plant medicines, and I came to cannabis first, which got me off of all the prescriptions, but it didn't let me truly get to the root of my issues and heal from the things that I had seen, things I had done, the people I had lost, until I decided to start exploring psychedelics again. And ayahuasca really helped me make peace with my past, and not just military service, but also childhood issues too.
This was after you got out of the military completely that you turned back to the plant medicines.
Correct. Yeah. I was out for maybe 4 years, 5 years.
So you're a science guy. You studied the brain, the chemical effects, and how the trip happens inside. What about, where does that meet spirituality? Because I think it's fascinating that you were in a film about ayahuasca. They found you, and you ended up being the person that's front and center, along with Mike. Mike was his name, right?
Yeah, Mike Cooley.
And taking this entheogen on camera and putting this out there for the world to see. Now, do you think that is some kind of spiritual calling, being that you went through this in college, had this knowledge, and then kind of got pulled or drawn to that moment where you first, took that sip on camera?
I do think that there is a spiritual calling here. I've always felt called to psychedelics, cannabis. Even when I was young, I took a break, obviously, for a very long time, but I was called back. And I think one of my doctors, I went through the VA system pretty extensively. I tried everything, and nothing really made any sense until one of my doctors said, "Listen, man, you have a spiritual wound, and you're not going to be able to find any actual healing until you find a spiritual solution." And he said right off the bat, he was like, "It doesn't have to be going to church or anything like that, but you're going to have to figure out what spiritual means to you." And when I found ayahuasca, that's when I began to understand what he meant.
Yeah, it sounds like a good doctor.
He was one of the few that was really good. He was one of the guys that really first started trying to address my issues from the root instead of just the symptoms.
Right. Man, that's insane that you studied all this plant medicine and then you separated from it and were sent through a world of trauma, like horrific things that, no human being should go through.
Yeah. It's I feel like I went through a almost like a purgatory, or honestly, well, it's a little bit of hell. Truthfully, Smedley Butler was not lying when he said war is hell. I think it was Smedley Butler. It might have been one of the other greats, but it's absolutely true. It's the best of times and the worst of times at the same time. There are some of the greatest moments that I can recall. These moments of intense bonding and brotherhood and belonging, and being truthful to my spirit, my soul, but at the same time doing some things that were completely in violation of all things that make me a good human being. So it was the absolute poles of human experience all at the same time.
Roxy, sorry, my puppy over here is going a little nuts. So, man, that journey, what was that like after your first session? I'm sure, because before your head was all muddled up and you're impacted by all the things that you're going through, and then there was like a moment in the film where he was saying, man, you came in here like a scared little puppy, and now look at you smiling, and you say, yeah, more than a few times with a shit-eating grin on your face. And as a person that's used psychedelics, I recognize that moment. Like, that's the moment after the hell that you go through, and then you come out of it like, oh man, I'm 1,000 pounds lighter, but I'm stronger.
Yeah, it was actually that moment was after my very last experience there that weekend. I drank ayahuasca 4 times that weekend, and Mike went 3 times. I went 4 times because I had a bit of a hiccup in my healing. My first night was extremely profound. You see some of the footage there in the movie. The first thing that I did, they asked you to take the medicine in your hands, and then also place your intention into the cup. And there's a moment there where I whisper something over the cup, and what I said was, forgive yourself. And in large part, I found a lot of forgiveness that night. I puked up a demon, and I made peace with it, and it allowed me to start the process of forgiving myself and forgiving everyone else in the world. The next day was the first daytime ceremony in the morning, and you saw that, and I felt like all of this demon that I purged from my body left this like hole. And then after the day after, during that daytime ceremony, it felt like all of this love and light seeped into that place where that demon was. And instead of a hole, I was filled up with this love and light. And then after that ceremony, I went and I laid down and I tried to get some rest, and there was no rest for me. My brain, it kind of just went haywire. And I came back to the nighttime ceremony that evening, and I was extremely confused and I didn't feel good at all. I was upset, and I didn't understand why I had lost that feeling. Just as quickly as all that love and light trickled into me, it trickled out. And then that night, that third ceremony, I came out of that ceremony also pretty confused about what had just happened. I didn't quite understand the experience itself. It seemed kind of shallow compared to my previous two experiences, and it also was just confusing and disconcerting. I didn't really get many answers that night, but the next day, you see me in the movie going and talking to Chris Young of Soul Quest Church of Ayahuasca, and I asked him, is it the right answer? Should I try this again to see if I can get back on track? And he said, sure, if that's what you're called to, then we'll do that again. And so I chose to do that last ceremony on Sunday. And it's kind of funny because I sat there and the whole time I struggled and I purged so much. And when the ceremony was over, I was still kind of in this limbo headspace. And I came back to sit around the fire pit with Mike Cooley, and Mike turned to me and asked me, "Hey man, how'd it go?" And I didn't really know in my head until I looked at him, and I just broke out laughing. And then I was just like, I guess it went pretty well. I didn't really, I wasn't sure right before now, but now I feel really good. So I guess I did finally get back on track, and for that I'm grateful.
Right. Yeah, Soul Quest is here in Orlando. I'm also in Orlando. I've been considering going. I haven't really looked too much into it yet. But I was curious because there was one of your daytime experiences. You were laying down in the palmetto bushes and just in the sunshine. It looked amazing. But what time of year was that? Because that's only possible like a couple of months out of the year here in Florida.
Yeah, that was April of 2016.
Yeah, any other time, man, it would have been pouring rain or scorching hot.
Yeah.
And so people, they say that when you do ayahuasca that because it comes from the jungle, you hallucinate like jungle themed snakes, serpents, and cats and stuff. Did you get any of that?
I honestly did not have any real visual any sort of visions or anything like that the first weekend. It was a very, very much more of an emotional experience than it was visual. I didn't actually get the deep visions until the next month I went down to Peru to drink in the jungle. And when I did that, I had extremely powerful visions.
So you've had multiple experiences now. What was it like being filmed for that, being documented? Do you think that had an impact in the experience?
At first, I was a bit worried that it would. I was worried that the presence of the camera would kind of like bring me out of myself and, like start acting like I was observing myself instead of, being myself. But pretty quickly over the course of the weekend, my knowledge of the camera actually just disappeared for most of it. I forgot that the camera was there many times, and I just was focused on my own healing.
Right. There were a few other people there at the ceremony, right? You and Mike, and then there was a handful of, I would assume, strangers.
Yeah, there was, and that was actually when we first got to the house. There was about 30 people there that weekend for ayahuasca. And when I got there, I had no idea there was going to be so many. I thought it was going to be a much smaller, more intimate setting. And when I first got there, maybe that's what Chris was referring to when he said scared little puppy, because I wasn't really afraid at all. But when I got there and I saw all the people, I was definitely like, well, I don't really want to show all of my deepest, darkest recesses to all of these strangers.
Right.
But I had made the trip there and I wasn't backing down. It's kind of like when you're up in the plane getting ready to jump out of the back, you don't get to just say no. You went up there for a reason, and you're on that static line. You're running along with the rest of the people, and you're going out the back of that plane.
Absolutely. How much did their energies play into, add to, or take away from your trip? Do you think it would have been better or worse anymore? intimate setting, or is the entheogen just so powerful that it overtakes you and makes it more of a solo, isolated experience?
I think there's definitely a truth to both of those things. I think that the ayahuasca does tend to sort of make it more an internal experience. Ayahuasca itself is a very much a substance that makes you go in, and I think that a lot of people have guards up, though. They have guards up when there are so many people around. And I think that for many people, doing much smaller circles could be quite beneficial for them. I've noticed that a lot of people seem to get more out of smaller circles where they get more individual attention.
So what was what was it like in Peru when you went back the month later?
In Peru was an extremely interesting experience. I went with a group of 6 other vets, and we went down specifically to pursue our healing from military trauma. I mean, a lot of us had childhood trauma too, but we all had the military trauma in common. We went down. It was a much smaller circle. We had a total of 7 people, and then we filmed that experience also, and it went into the creation of another short film called Soldiers of the Vine, which is available for free on YouTube.
Oh, really?
But definitely, yeah, but anybody listening, you're definitely going to have to see From Shock to Awe. It is far more illustrative of the healing that can come from ayahuasca than Soldiers of the Vine is. Soldiers of the Vine has more like talking heads and experts that are talking about the benefits of ayahuasca, and then it just touches very briefly on each of our stories.
I think there's a lot of sorry, I think there's a lot of power in From Shock to Awe and documenting your journey for sure, and the way that it was done was so brilliant.
Yeah, Luke, it was absolutely amazing. The director, he is a wizard, and very early on, originally they were following a big group of veterans who were using cannabis. They followed Weed for Warriors Project in their bus trip across the country, and they talked with a lot of people there about cannabis, and they were going to do a separate group for MDMA, but about halfway through the filming, they came back to me and Mike Cooley, and they said, hey, listen, we just want to let you guys know that we've thrown out all of the footage that we had from the experts. We threw out all the footage from the cannabis stuff, and we're just focusing on your 2 stories because we want to tell the actual story of healing from ayahuasca, and we don't want this to be like all the other movies.
I think that was a brilliant decision, because sitting there with facts being thrown at you is completely different than actually investing in, I don't want to say characters because you're real people, investing in your journey, in seeing you, like when they came before you went and did the ceremony, they documented your life just to see how shaken, shell shocked you were from war. And they got that brilliantly on camera. I think that is amazing. And props to you, man, because I know when you're going through something, inviting people into your home to film you when you're going through a dark time can't be easy.
No, it's not. At that point, I was just so sick of being broken, though, I was willing to do anything just to make it all stop,
Right, that kind of desperation. But that's, when it gets the darkest, that's when you find that one experience, that one trip, whatever it may be, that shines the brightest light on you. So
yeah.
In the documentary, at the end, it catches up with you guys 5 months later. You had taken ayahuasca again after that, so you had multiple ceremonies.
Yeah, actually, I've done ayahuasca now probably over 30 times.
Oh wow!
As soon as I took it the very first time, that very first weekend, I was like, wow, okay, this can really work. And I need to know everything there is to know about this and every other psychedelic out there. So a month after we started filming From Shock to Awe, I went down to Peru to drink ayahuasca in the jungle there. We did a number of other plant medicines down there also. It wasn't just ayahuasca, but we had a bit of experience with some of the other jungle medicines there. Not all of them are psychoactive. A lot of them are just it just tastes like dirty dirt water, you know. It doesn't really do anything psychological to you, but it's supposed to help in the healing of the body. But then a month after that, I went down to Mexico to do ibogaine and toad. And then a month after that, it was peyote back here in the States. And a month after that, it was mushrooms. So I really went deep in 2016. But the bonus is I came out of 2016 with a very clear head and a very happy heart.
Ibogaine, that's the one that helps people overcome addictions, right?
Correct. Yeah. And I wasn't really on any of the pharmaceutical drugs anymore, but I did it more for spiritual exploration. And it's an extremely difficult experience. It's about 40 hours start to finish, based on the baseline, and it's a good solid 8 to 12 hour peak. It is extremely disorienting, nauseating, and it's taxing. It's an absolutely grueling experience, and it's not for the faint of heart. But the one thing that I did find after ibogaine was that I started examining everything in my life and determining what parts of it that I was addicted to, just behavioral things. Sometimes I started examining my Facebook use and
Yeah.
that, you know, and I started changing the way that I related to every addictor in my life. And what I found is that PTSD in some ways is sort of an addictive process. Basically, what happens in PTSD is we learn certain coping behaviors, certain coping mechanisms that allow us to function in a really bad environment. And what happens is that we get taken out of that really bad environment, and then we still cling to these outdated behaviors that don't serve us anymore. And that's basically what addiction is. Addiction is when you find something that relieves the pain of life or whatever it is that you're going through. And at first it does relieve the pain, but eventually you start pursuing it to the point that it begins damaging your life. And that's exactly what PTSD does. You keep relying on these outdated behaviors, and it just destroys your entire life. So I found that by relating to the very problem of PTSD in a different way helped me solve a lot of the issues that I was dealing with.
What about toad? You also said that you did toad as well as ibogaine in Mexico?
Correct, yeah.
What is that one?
Toad is 5-methoxy-DMT.
Oh, okay.
So, DMT is actually the active substance in ayahuasca. So ayahuasca has the MAOI from the vine, and then from the leaf, the chacruna, it has DMT in the leaves. And there are of course other entourage elements in there, things like N-methyltryptamine and a few other things. But so the experience of toad couldn't be more different than DMT, though. It is absolutely. It is not even. Gosh, it's honestly, it's really hard to describe. Honestly, all of these experiences are extremely difficult to put into words. They're really beyond words. But,
how do you take toad? Was that intravenous, or do you smoke that one?
That is vaporized, yeah. It's actually a secretion from the backs of Bufo alvarius toads that are found in the Sonoran Desert.
And, that's the one where they rub it on the glass and they scrape it off and they get the powder out of that the next day.
Correct, yeah. And they just kind of comes in like these little tiny golden flakes, and that they scrape off the glass, and they measure out a very specific amount and then vaporize that for your toad experience. And the experience itself lasts only about 15-20 minutes.
How different is that from like your average neighborhood DMT that you would find?
It couldn't be more different. It is night and day. There are no two different substances in the psychedelics that are more different, but at the same time, they have a lot of similarities. I mean, for instance, DMT, when vaporized, it's also 15 to 20 minutes. But DMT is by far the most visual psychedelic out there, and 5-MeO is by far the least visual psychedelic out there.
It's least visual. So what is that experience like? Is it all internal? Is it emotional? How does that work in your head?
Yeah, it's intensely emotional, and mental too. Basically, the best I can describe 5-MeO DMT is it's a very direct reduction in your ego, your default mode network in your brain. Your default mode network is what is most associated with your idea of who you are. And our idea of who we are is really just the tip of the iceberg. There's far more in there than our ego believes that we are. And when you downregulate the ego to the point where it disappears entirely, this so much else comes to the surface. And essentially what I experienced, it seemed like I was reunified with all existence. My separateness was dissolved, and I became one with everything. And many people say it's sort of like a near-death experience or meeting God, and for some people it's like a cosmic orgasm. It's a feeling of intense love, peace, acceptance, and truth.
Does that feeling stick with you for long, or does your ego sort of slowly fight its way back over the coming weeks or months after you do it?
Your ego definitely comes back, but it comes back with this new knowledge,
Right.
and over time the effects will definitely fade, but at the same time, these things do change you for the rest of your life afterwards. You can drink ayahuasca one time and you will change from that point forward, and you will probably become a better person. And that's true for all the psychedelics. 5-MeO, although the effects only last, 15 to 30 minutes, you will be changed probably for a very long time afterwards, because these experiences just rip the veil away from the wonder of existence.
When you did mescaline, you said you did peyote too when you came back to America. And did you do that with like an indigenous tribe, or did they have another setup, sort of like Soul Quest?
Yeah, I actually did not do it with an indigenous tribe, and I'm still looking forward to my first experience with American tribes that use peyote. I did it with another regular American guy, and mescaline is a different substance. It's a phenethylamine. It's not a tryptamine, so it does work slightly different. It's a very easy headspace where, for the most part, you don't go into these very, very dark areas. It's a much happier, easier place to be. But at the same time, you're still downloading intense realizations about the nature of life and how to improve your own.
That sounds a lot different than some of the other things you did before that. So is that like a nice change of pace, sort of a relief to have this kind of happiness, floaty, sunshine trip experience?
Yeah, it was. But it served to solidify a lot of the other things that I had made, realizations that I had made from other places. And I think honestly that every single one of these substances has a very a valuable use for an individual and for society too. And I think honestly that we need access to every single one of them if we're really going to heal from all of the untreated trauma that we have as a society and as people.
Absolutely. How did this happen to society where we lost all coming of age ceremonies and healing and spirituality? How did this happen? What led us to this point, and now we have to fight to get what should have been ours from the beginning, what people have been doing since the beginning of mankind?
Yeah, I mean, truthfully, these are natural rights of ours. These are not something that the government can actually take away. They can try, and they're doing a bang-up job of trying right now, but they're really ultimately what they're doing is they're messing up society quite a bit with the war on drugs.
Absolutely.
I think we've really been focused, I think, on the reductionistic scientific exploration of reality, and these things come from the opposite ends of the spectrum, the holistic, the non-dual perspectives.
Why do you think the government is trying to make all this illegal? Is it political gain? Do they think they're seriously looking out for our health and well-being? What's the deal with that?
I think, honestly, I mean, there's a lot of speculation about they don't want to approve these substances because these substances actually break down our belief in the system. But I honestly don't think that that's the case. I think that they're really just sort of reacting to it in a knee-jerk, puritanical fashion. And our country is founded by puritanical teetotalers. These are the same people that wanted to ban alcohol in the 1920s, and you see how well that went. So after we banned alcohol, we tried to find a number of other ways to keep the process going. And, we couldn't keep alcohol down because far too many people were drinking. But after the 1920s, when we legalized alcohol again, we found a succession of other drugs that we could successfully demonize that really people hadn't come into contact with yet. Not many people knew about ayahuasca or mescaline and peyote at San Pedro, toad. Nobody even knew about toad until the late 70s and early 80s, honestly. So a lot of these things, they're out there, and the government wants to prevent us from taking part in them, partly just because they're fun.
Do you think that there was a point in time where these things were globally known, and maybe the church, like the Catholic Church or some force, wanted to get rid of them? Because, I was doing some research for my humanities course about the Greeks and the philosophers. They had this cave that they would go to and just stand over it and then have all these revelations. Like, that sounds to me like a psychedelic trip.
Yeah, and honestly, the Greeks had the Eleusinian mysteries, where they were probably using some type of ergot to have, experiences. Psilocybin mushrooms are present all over the face of the earth. They're on almost every single continent.
I think that's insane. That's one thing that's everywhere.
Yeah. And they're not unknown, and we have access to these things. They're in our environment, and all of these plant medicines, not all of them grow over the entire face of the planet, but the fact is that some of them do, and we all have access to them. And there's no way. I honestly, when I was in North Carolina and I was at the depths of my hell after the military, I found psilocybin mushrooms growing out of a mulch pile in my front yard. And, there wasn't many of them, but it was enough for like a couple little mushrooms, little caps. And I took those off, I dried them, and I ate them. And it wasn't much except for like a very slight shift in perspective and a brightening of my perceptions. But it was enough to lead me on the path to seek more psychedelics.
Right. Mushrooms are a great like entry, first step, and it's also a good little reset, like a little tweak to the psyche and the spirituality. And low doses. I don't know so much about the larger doses. I tend to stay away from that.
Yeah, and honestly, like they're a great intro, and they are really. I think that we're sort of entering the psychedelic renaissance also with psilocybin mushrooms. I founded an organization called Veterans for Natural Rights. Like I said earlier, these things are our natural rights, and Veterans for Natural Rights is really founded on the idea that we as citizens need to reclaim the natural rights that government has been trying to take away from us since basically its inception. And just recently, we've had a major win. We took part in the decriminalization effort here in Denver for psilocybin mushrooms.
Yeah, good to go.
Yeah, Decriminalize Denver was the organization that really spearheaded that. The VNR took part, Veterans for Natural Rights took part. We did a lot of media to support the effort, and it turns out we won. And slowly that is beginning to change the world. Oakland decriminalized a lot of nature after that. Now Chicago's talking about decriminalizing. Dallas is talking about decriminalizing. Even Kansas City's talking about decriminalizing. There's Portland. There's so many different places now that have been inspired by what we did in Denver to start decriminalizing nature for themselves.
But hey, it's possible. We can do this.
Absolutely. And that's what we really showed, is that this is not a pipe dream. This is not something that is completely out of the realm of possibility. We showed people that this is possible and it's real.
Yeah, it's kind of riding in the wake of marijuana. We know we can get things legal. And I think the biggest hurdle is lack of awareness, because getting people to vote on something that they don't understand or know about is kind of it's difficult. It's easy for, a conservative to say, oh, well, heroin is bad, meth is bad, so mushrooms and LSD have to be bad too. They should also be illegal. So let's keep that in its place and don't let anybody do it. I don't want my kids to be exposed to that kind of thing. But they don't really know, they don't understand what these things are. They're a very powerful tool.
Yeah, absolutely. And truthfully, every drug is just a powerful tool. It's just a matter of how you use it. The fact is that heroin itself, it has so much loaded meaning to it, baggage. And people immediately, when you hear heroin, you're just like, oh my God, that's like, it's poison. But truthfully, pharmaceutically pure heroin is it's a very effective painkiller. It's about twice as powerful as morphine, and the fact is it's not even the most powerful opiate we have on the market. We have fentanyl and things like Dilaudid, which is oxymorphone and hydromorphone. Oxymorphone is Opana. These things are 10 times more potent than morphine. And so therefore they're 5 times more potent than heroin is. And yet heroin's illegal, but these other things are approved.
Yeah, made in labs, promoted by doctors. Meanwhile, the heroin trade keeps a violent organization in power in Mexico, the cartel killing people. And the
Taliban,
yeah, the heroin over there too. It's insane. It doesn't make any sense to me other than somebody out there is making money off of keeping these things illegal and keeping the public ignorant.
It's true, and we are keeping a lot of these things illegal so that we are preserving an unnatural monopoly in the market. These pharmaceutical companies, they have a government-enforced monopoly on medical care, and what more and more people are finding out is that they can emancipate themselves from this medico-pharmaceutical complex and become their own doctors, their own healers, their own shamans, and their own heroes.
Right. That's wonderful. You said in the documentary towards the end that you plan on running for office. Are you still holding true to that? You still on that path?
I am. Just this past year, I went to a training where I was trying to learn the ropes to how do you actually run a campaign. And I've been exploring the various different ways to move forward here in Colorado. I haven't really just settled on any one thing yet. I think that probably my next window for election will be somewhere around 2026. That's when my representative here is term limited. So I probably throw my hat in the ring sometime around then. And it may be sooner if he decides that he doesn't want to serve out the rest of his time. If he decides not to run one of these elections, I'll probably throw my hat in the ring before then.
Right on. So if you get elected and get into office, first of all, what is the answer? What's the solution to making these things legal and available? And when you get into office, what could you do about it?
Well, at first, I probably won't be able to do much. I think that the answer is complete decriminalization of all drugs. It's not just about the psychedelics and cannabis. It's all drugs. If we can take the power away from the cartels, we will limit human suffering by, exponential factors. We can largely eliminate these cartels from existence if we take their streams of revenue away from them. And they're finding this now with the legalization and decriminalization of cannabis in the United States. The cartels are losing a massive influx of money, and we literally hurt their bottom line, and we can continue to take it out of them by decriminalizing every other source of revenue they have. And then just focusing on the ones that are really, really bad. Things like human trafficking and slavery and, the extortion, things like that. These are activities will always be illegal because they involve hurting directly someone else. But drugs are really a victimless crime. You're not hurting anybody except for yourself. And some people are they're just trying to treat their untreated trauma from childhood or from whatever happened to them. And I don't think we should be criminalizing people simply for trying to find an answer to the suffering they feel on a daily basis. What we should do is we should just decriminalize all of it and then focus all of our efforts on actually prosecuting the crimes that need to be prosecuted. Which, like I mentioned, things like human trafficking and theft, extortion, things like that. If we focused all our energy on that and took away their revenue streams, I think we'd do a lot of damage to these criminal organizations and eventually eliminate them from the face of the earth.
And also to help our society. But just to play devil's advocate, you said that this would eliminate a lot of human suffering. But what about the argument that maybe if heroin was available to everybody, we would have more addicts in the street? Do you think that would create more suffering here in the United States?
I think that the worry is overblown. I think that what actually happens when you decriminalize drugs is drug use goes down. You see it in Portugal. Portugal decriminalized drugs on the individual level in the early 2000s, and they've had a across-the-board reduction in harm from drugs, and also an across-the-board reduction in the rates of use for drugs too.
Do you know off the top of your head? I couldn't tell you which country it is, but one country not only like decriminalized heroin, just to keep going with that example, but they legalized it, and they had centers where people could go to get a dose of heroin as many times as they want, as frequently as they want. And it eliminated, I step outside of my house and I step on freaking syringes sometimes. They're out there laying around. It's insane, but it cleaned up the streets. There's no more people, laying around or people dying from cotton fever or any other ailments, overdosing, because there's professionals on site, and it actually reduced the amount of people that used in society, and the number of people that came would dwindle, and they would stop coming over time, except for maybe a select few.
Yeah, I think if we remove the stigma from it, that's one thing that all these things hold in common, is the isolation. We ostracize and we other addicts, and we ostracize and we other veterans when they come back from war. We don't want to deal with them, and so we medicate them into oblivion and lock them away in their own basements and bathrooms and bedrooms, and they just don't come out, and so they don't bother the rest of the population. I think that with addicts, it's kind of the same thing. If we stop othering and ostracizing them for trying to fix themselves, we can then bring them in, and the solution to isolation is connection, and you're bringing them back into society, and you're giving them a place again where they're not judged, and you can give them pharmaceutically pure heroin, which greatly reduces the harm that they're going to be doing to their bodies, and at the same time you're exposing them to all the other tools that they could use to actually fix their problem instead of simply just trying to treat the symptoms, the pain of existence. Now you're saying, hey guys, there's this great thing out there called ibogaine, and it could fix you forever. And then so these heroin addicts, they come in and they start thinking about it, and they may not pick it right away, but eventually they're going to come around to the point where they're just like, I don't want to do this anymore. This life is so painful. It's not worth living. I want to be better. And eventually everyone gets to that point. There's not many long-term addicts out there who just love being an addict. Everybody hates it. So if you stop ostracizing them and give them the option to come back to society and have that connection again and break the isolation, soon you've fixed an addict.
Absolutely. I think definitely the first step to that is awareness, and doing this documentary From Shock to Awe is a great thing. And I love what it's doing. And so where is it gonna be available? Where can you go and watch this? It's out now, right?
Yeah, it's out now. We released on October 22nd. It's available on Amazon, iTunes, Google Play, and Vimeo.
Right on. I want to check that out again. I want to show some of my veteran friends to get them on it, because I know a lot of them, even if they didn't see action necessarily, they're still in a lot of pain from just the programming that the military has done to them.
It's absolutely truthful too. There are so many people in the military who are so deeply hurt, and a lot of times it's childhood trauma, and then they come to the military, and the military teaches them these coping skills. But in teaching them these coping skills, they also slightly traumatize them again too. And I think that there are a lot of people in the military that could benefit from these substances, and honestly, there's a lot of people in society. I mean, the prevalence of PTSD is much higher in the military than anywhere else, but the vast majority of people who actually have PTSD are civilians. I like to say that we may have gone overseas to war, but everybody's got a war in their own hearts, and we all need to address these scars of war that we all hold and get some stitches in there and try to put some salve on it and heal it up. These are spiritual wounds.
That's beautiful, man. One more question to wrap it up. What's your take on war? I know that's not going to be a short answer, but just as nicely as you can put it, is war necessary at all ever?
Yes, which is a crazy thing to say, but yes. If there is an unreasoning aggressor who is trying to end your existence, you're going to have to defend yourself. There's never going to be a world in which nobody ever has to defend themselves. The fact is that sometimes societies go bad and people go bad, and you're going to have to defend your life with lethal force.
We're all warriors.
There's going to be those cases out there, and the fact is that war is probably as a process will probably be necessary forever as long as there are aggressors. But right now, America has been put in the position of being an aggressor. We are now perpetrating a lot of what I would say are essentially crimes against the planet across the world. We are engaged in surreptitious proxy wars. We have troops in 149 countries around the world. Is any of this really necessary? No, I don't believe hardly any of it is absolutely necessary. We should really pull back all of our involvement in the disputes of other countries and really focus on our own. We're spending so much time, energy, effort, and money trying to fix everybody else's problem in the world when our problems here at home are multiplying. We need to focus on ourselves for once.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for your time, Matt. This has been a wonderful interview, and thank you. And I appreciate what you've done for the cause, for raising awareness to psychedelics and the journey that you went through. But to put that out there on film, man, that's amazing.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate it. It was fun coming on and talking to you, man.
Thanks for sitting down with me, man. Have a good night.
All right, you too, man.
Thank you.